and welcome to a Mulbery Talent Partners leadership conversation. My name is Kelsey Daly, and I am the Senior Marketing and Events Specialist here at Mulbery. So a little bit about Mulbery. We are a full-service staffing and recruiting agency serving the Pacific Northwest and the San Francisco Bay Area. Our specialty areas include human resources, administrative office, finance, accounting, payroll, and operations. I encourage you to check out our website at mulberrytalent.com to see previously recorded Mulbery conversations and to view our full suite of service offerings and current job opportunities. So let's dive in. Today, we are joined by our founder, Lauren Francis, and we are welcoming back Brandi Oldham, founder and owner of Talent Career Coaching. Prior to becoming a coach, Brandi worked in corporate HR in both the finance and global sportswear industries. As a coach, her areas of expertise include recruiting, hiring, personal development, team development, and training. Her goal is to help individuals and teams learn about their natural strengths, understand how their unique talents can make an impact, and design plans to help them achieve more. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Brandi and Lauren.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome back, Brandi.
Thank you so much.
We had such a great conversation a month or so ago, and just to have you, we just had to have you back. It's just great. And you just add so much value.
My pleasure.
Yeah. And I've also noticed on Instagram and LinkedIn that you've brought on a couple new coaches. Could you tell people a little bit about your practice and what you do and how you can help them?
Yeah, absolutely. So Talent Career Coaching is designed to help those ambitious go-getters that are frustrated with their current roles, wanting to find something more, get paid for what they love to do, and ultimately use their talents to change the world around them. So you're correct. I have brought on two additional individuals. We've got Tatiana and Ruthie, who are now on board. And spoiler alert, there's another coach coming in a couple weeks. We're growing, and the coaches that I'm bringing on board are people that align with obviously our mission and the career services we want to provide, but they're also people who bring talents that I don't have. And that's one of the things that I am so excited about. Actually, both Tatiana and Ruthie have tech-ish backgrounds in different ways that they've done it, but I don't have any experience in tech. So being able to utilize their brains has been phenomenal. Tatiana is going to focus mostly on leaders, and Ruthie is our go-to expert for anything career related. So both of those gals are fantastic. If you want to schedule an appointment with them, they would love it. I would love it. They're wonderful people. Look for more faces than just mine in the coming weeks and months. So
that's great. So what are we talking about today?
Yeah. So today in this leadership conversation, I want to talk with all of our leaders that are listening in, or people who are aspiring to be leaders, about the importance of strength. So I am a Clifton Gallup certified strengths coach. It's a global certification. For those of you that aren't familiar with Clifton Strengths, formerly called Strengths Finders, it is an assessment that is based on over 6 decades worth of research. And it's global research, so there is a limited amount of bias compared to some of the other assessments that are out there. That was really important for me to find something that didn't have a lot of bias in it. And the best part is what I love about it. Clifton Strengths focus on what you're good at. Let's stop trying to build things that aren't natural, and let's focus on the things that we're good at, and let's exponentially use them. Just like with my team, they're bringing things to the table I don't have the skill set in. Yeah. So let the experts do the work. So today I would love to talk a little bit more about them. And I know right before we jumped on, I was telling you, Lauren, I just actually attended the Gallup at Work conference. It all coincided in 1 week, but the last 2 days they've been out in Omaha. I attended virtually because of this and a few other things that I had going on, but they're talking all about the latest and greatest research of why strengths-based languages matter for both teams and organizations. If you're a manager and you've got a group of people below you, I hope by now you figured out they're not the same, and they never will be, and they're not going to be you either. I'm so sorry. As much as we wish that were the case sometimes, we've got unique personalities, unique skill sets, unique areas of expertise joining our teams. And my goal is to help managers and leaders figure out, okay, what is the language I can use to communicate to this person right at their level, so I can take them from 1 to 3 and 3 to 5, 5 to 10. And we start progressing and growing those individuals in those organizations.
Wow. That's what we want to talk about. That is just, why not? And it makes so much sense, because you always hear people say when they're really happy in their careers, I love what I do and
Yes.
I'm good at what I do. And it empowers me more because I'm able to affect change and I'm able to influence and provide value. And who wouldn't want to do that all day long?
Right. And when we're engaged in our work, we're 6 times more likely to drive results and be productive and enjoy our day to day. We spend
Sure.
so much time at work, so
Yeah.
much time. Think about that for a second. Outside of probably family time, work is the biggest influence on our lives. Sometimes it overshadows even that family time. So let's make sure that work that you're doing ties into who you are as a person and what you're passionate about.
Yeah. And do you think leaders that, for example, someone's in the wrong role or you notice their gifts, but
Yeah.
there is a disconnect? And the job of a leader would be to
Help
look at
them.
that and help identify that and make some changes, as opposed to, no, they're not doing their job well, or those kinds of responses.
Yeah. As a leader, I would say every single person on your team has value, has
Mm.
high value. And one of the things that I think people get mistaken is you want the person in the role to flourish. But at the end of the day, a job still has to get done. For me, one of my top strengths is strategic. And when I think back on my career, there were certain roles that I was in that I was really unhappy, like genuinely unhappy. And when I think about those roles, I realize there was nothing strategic in those roles. I was doing things that were present. They required me to be in the moment, very present, not forward thinking, almost reactionary. And yeah, of course, it's grinding, right, with my natural strengths. And thankfully, I had a really great manager that identified that and was like, hey, we need to get you back into a strategic role. And immediately the world opened up.
Wow.
But that's what I would say for our managers. If you've got someone on your team who, you might classify as like a poor performer or not fitting the needs of the team, let's take a look at that individual and say, is there a way for us to craft the work that they're doing to match the natural skill set that they have? If there's not, then yeah, absolutely. Let's help them find something that they're going to flourish in, because the company is going to be better. They're going to be better. Your team is going to be better. Like everybody wins. There's no negative to that. Or is there a way that you can craft the work that they're doing to tie into the things that matter to them? For me, if I'm a strategic person, yeah, maybe my job at day to day is in the present, but could we have a conversation every month where I get to tackle something that's 6 months, 12 months out?
Sure.
Immediate increase in satisfaction in my work,
Sure.
even if it's not the majority of what I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are the 3 things? We've identified 3 areas that we're going to focus on today. Where do you want to start?
Maybe getting everybody familiar with Clifton Strengths if they're not familiar with it. So if you are a leader listening in, just to give you some background, Clifton Strengths is an assessment that can be done online for you and your team. My company offers trainings for the teams, but you could also just do the assessment if you wanted as an individual, just to know where you're at, get yourself some language around what are your strengths. A lot of times, especially new managers, they sit down with people and they're like, so what are you good at? And your employee is, cool, you just threw me in the ocean and now I'm drowning. I don't know how to answer that question. So this is a great tool to be able to direct the conversation to say, okay, now we have some language to work with. Let's dive in deeper and figure out what works for you. So that's what I would say, just to give a little background there. But I guess the next thing I would say is, how do you use this assessment on an individual basis for you? And how do you use that if you're going to be coaching someone else or leading someone else as a manager? On an individual basis, the report is huge. It's like a big document that you can read through and you're going to get a lot of information about yourself. The same thing I would say about your teams is sitting down with them, having them read it ahead of time, and then using that language to direct the conversation and ask questions like, what's working for you in the role based on what you're reading here in your report? What's working? What's not working? And what can I do? Is there any ideas you have about how I might be able to help you with that? So that was what I would say in terms of like overview of the assessment and how it could be utilized if someone's listening in and wants to know more.
Absolutely. And so you've used Clifton Strengths in your previous work.
Yeah. So I actually took the assessment for the first time, God, it's been over 10 years ago now, and it stuck with me. And then later on, fast forward, I've opened my own business, and it was the first certification I wanted to go get because it helped me progress my career very quickly, knowing that language, knowing what my strengths were. And it's funny because you take it 10 years ago and you take it now, and not much has changed. Like they talk about that, like the assessment, once you've taken it past the age of around 25, probably not going to change too much. unless you have a traumatic life event, obviously, catastrophic, that's not your run of the mill, everyday kind of stuff. My top 10 have moved, but they're all still there. So I still have the same talent or strength DNA that I had 10 years ago. I'm just using it differently now. Yeah.
When we were talking about this topic, you had talked about what leaders often say or can cite is that, oh my gosh, I don't have as much time to spend with my team.
Yep.
So how do you respond to that?
Yes. So if you're a manager, you're going to want to come through the computer at me here for a second. But I just, at the Gallup at Work Summit that they just had this week, Gallup does a bunch of research. If you're on LinkedIn, I'm sure you've seen their research. They just released a new book called Culture Shock. And full transparency, I have not read the whole thing. I'm about halfway through. I've had it, I think, 4 days now. But it is all about the pandemic and the impact that the pandemic had on the workforce. And what the research is showing is, you've heard this term quiet quitting, people getting really disengaged at work, they're just checking out. And what they found is if managers check in with their employees once a week, that dramatically decreases. Burnout decreases. This quiet quitting term, or disengagement, as I like to call it, decreases. But when you're a manager, and I'm sure if you're on this call, so you're going to come to the computer, you're going once a week. Oh my gosh, I've got a team of 25. How am I going to add more to my plate? I've already got a laundry list. And the thing I want you to think through is, a lot of times when managers get another thing piled on their plate, they start doing what I like to call like check the box. Okay, I'm going to check with that person, check with that person, check with that person. I want you to reframe this. The reality is you're likely talking to your employee throughout the week at some point in time, right? And it can be as simple as 30 seconds to 3 minutes, asking them 3 questions. What's working for you this week? What challenges are you facing? What's your plan, or how can I help support you in that? Allow them to take the ownership to guide the conversation, to say, this is what I'm working on, this is what's important, and this is where I'm struggling. And as a manager, you've got that higher level view. You might be able to say, wait a minute, that's not pressing. Pause that. And now all of a sudden your employee is like, whoa, I feel seen. I feel heard. I feel valued. And I know that someone's on my side helping me navigate.
Yeah.
Immediate uplift and engagement.
And my husband and I do this every day. At the end of the day, we always go, okay, what was your high? What was your low?
Oh, love that.
And it's great because it helps us talk about our day. And my high was, oh my gosh, whatever happened. And my low was whatever it was. And then we're able to have a conversation, and not that the low is negative, but the low is a low for whatever reason. And so I agree with that, is that we are all functioning every day with all the stuff we have on our plate. And I think the other problem that managers get into is this scheduling time.
Yes.
Scheduling time takes more time than just to have the conversation, right?
Yes.
So I think we make it more complicated than it needs to be.
100%.
It's like relating. It's relating in real time, right? Yes.
This doesn't have to feel forced. We're people. Like, we forget that. Like, we get in the workplace and there's hierarchy and all these things. Like, at the end of the day, we're people. If you ran into this person at a coffee shop, it would be a totally different conversation than this structured meeting that you've got in the calendar. To be clear, I'm not saying not to structure meetings. The one thing, I just published a blog article, I think it was last week, about managers and 5 things they can do to be a better manager. And one of those tips is, if you have a meeting on the calendar, show up on time, show up and be present. There is nothing worse than sitting in an empty conference room, waiting for your manager when you know you've got a mountain of work going on. It just feels, oh, they don't value my time. Oh, they don't value my contribution. And then you show up and they're on their phone or they're doing other things. It's just wasted. That meeting is truly a wasted 30 minutes potentially. Rather than showing up, maybe you do a smaller check-in, but it's intentional. It's where are you at? How are you doing?
Sure.
What do you want to be doing more of? And how can I help support you in that?
Yeah, it's great. And we were talking earlier about the annual review.
Oh gosh.
That's not effective. And the one-on-ones, whether they're weekly or monthly or whatever the schedule is, but to have this day in, day out connection. And it's not about taking time, it's about adding time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that annual review, if you think about that, all the research shows not only do employees hate it, but managers loathe it, right? It's an extra work load that gets put on your calendar at one time of year. You're having to sit back and think about what this person has contributed or not contributed for the last 12 months. Are you kidding me? Do you remember what you had for dinner last week? No. Please try and remember all the contributions your team member has had for the last 12 months. Everyone's set up to fail. Rather than in the moment giving that feedback to that employee to say, ooh, I saw that presentation you made, that powerful pause, that great question you asked, that was fantastic. Keep doing what you're doing. Or, hey, we missed the mark at this little portion of the presentation. How can I help? Let's recraft that. Let's rethink about how we can do that differently. What would you do differently? And allowing them to give their input there in the moment.
Yeah, so we're really not managers, we are mentors. And so changing the mindset of what it is that we're really doing.
Yes. I like to tell people they're coaches. Yeah. You think back to being a child, if you played sports, for example. I actually just talked with a gentleman yesterday and he used this analogy and I love it. He was meeting with someone who was a coach and the coach said to him, when you come into here and you come into this session and you meet with me, this is a timeout in the game, right? I'm giving you input. I'm giving you feedback. I'm giving you instruction. But at the end of the day, you have to go back out on that court and play that game.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to think about as being a manager. You're that coach. You're helping that employee say, hey, come on over here. Let me give you the value of the impact, the input, all the things that I'm seeing about this game that's happening that you can't see because you're in it. And then I'm going to push you back out in that game. And now you have that higher level view to be able to go and execute better. Yeah, we're coaches. We're helping drive, but at the end of the day, they're driving it. We're just pointing out the things that maybe we can't see.
Think Ted Lasso.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love Ted Lasso.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So all these changes, how are companies adopting this book that you just picked up? We've gone through a seismic shift in the workplace. And I think people are still trying to find their way through that. Are companies catching on? Are leaders progressive in this way? What's happening? Because I know everyone was leaving their jobs last year. And so I think people were leaving their jobs things just really started to look different. Yeah. And now we're on the other side of that, but we're still, I don't know, we're still there in some ways. Totally. Is your observation?
I don't think companies are implementing this yet just because the research is literally hot off the press. But being in that conference this week, I actually was really excited. I was coming on here because I was like, oh, we can get this word out. We can tell people about what's going on. The biggest thing that they're noticing is when you go through the pandemic, everyone went home, right? We all went home. We're working from home. The way that we're working shifted. Engagement is down. And it has continued to be down even after the pandemic, because for a myriad of reasons, right? When you want you to come back to the office, we want you to stay out of the office. There's just so many different things that people on an individual basis are dealing with. And one of the things that happened with the Great Resignation is engagement dropped. Mm-hmm. And when engagement drops, they exit. And the reason they're exiting is because there's not development happening in the workplace. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to develop someone when you're not sitting right next to them every day. Mm-hmm. It's not impossible. We just have to think about it differently. And one of the things that they've noticed from the research is, if we have any executives listening in, this is where you really need to tune in for a second, because this is going to make or break your company. When individuals went home, the tie from your company to the customer changed. It's no longer the company and the brand and the customer. It is now the individual, the employee, and the customer, because we all were craving relationships. And now all of a sudden on Zoom meetings, Lauren, I'm getting to know you. I'm not getting to know Mulbery and everyone that I'm being gone through. I'm going with you. I know who you are. Right. And so what happens is when that employee disengages and exits, that customer follows that employee. And the thing that we can't necessarily control is employees maybe saying things like, if they're not tied into the brand or they're not tied into the culture, I don't know that I would be doing that. Like that's not something they would say in the office if their boss is sitting right next to them. But that is something they could get away with saying potentially at home. Now, what I don't want everyone leaving this conversation to do is get fearful and start micromanaging everybody. And everyone's got to go back to the office and we have to do it. That's not it. You're missing the mark if that's where your head went. What we need to do is we need to start developing our people. We need to show them they're valued. We need to show them that we see the potential in them.
Mm.
And that doesn't mean handing out raises and promotions and all these. You're going to have a very top heavy organization real quick.
Mm.
Every role that you're in, you have the ability to develop. And that's, I think, what managers and leaders need to understand is there does come a time where you need to promote. There does come a time where a salary needs to increase. If the role has become more than what the person was hired to do, and it's the responsibility is increased, yeah, we need to talk about that. But that's not just the only thing. If you're able to develop your people on your team and say, hey, I see you, I see your creativity, I want to inject more of that into our team. You seem like someone who's a forward thinker. How can we get you to think proactively about the future on behalf of our team? You seem like someone who has high empathy. What can we do to our team to add more human connection and not be so data focused? Or vice versa. There's a lot of opportunities there where people want to feel seen, valued, and heard. And that's where we're missing the mark. That can happen in a virtual environment. It can happen in the office, but it has to be intentional.
So a lot of this is put on the leaders and the managers. What can the individual do to add to that experience? Because I know there's a generational thing going on and what people want in the workplace now versus pre-pandemic or before, prior. Talk about the individual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To anyone listening, whether you're a leader, an individual contributor, you're just starting out, you're the only one that's going to give the biggest oomph about your career. It is point blank. Let me just start there.
Yeah.
Your manager's going to care. As a coach, I'm going to care. But at the end of the day, you are the person who's going to care the absolute most. Right. Because it's your career. And therefore, I would say, own your career. If you've got a manager that is not developing you, you don't have to develop in the office. That is such a false claim. Maybe it means getting a coach and figuring out what are my strengths, but what am I good at? And how can I harness those strengths in the office? And if I'm not filling my bucket there, how can I harness them outside the office so that I'm feeling like I'm motivated, I'm passionate, I'm connected? But the biggest thing I can say for an individual is you can't rely on your manager. They can't be everything for you. They can't. It's just, you're setting yourself up to fail if you think that's possible. The day that you start owning your own growth and your own trajectory, that is the day I usually see a lift in the manager-employee relationship. Because now all of a sudden you're getting into conversations and you're, truth be told, managing up. You're able to articulate to your manager, I've been doing some reflecting and I realize these things are what drive me. These are the tasks I'm invigorated by. How can I incorporate more of that into my day-to-day? And now you're giving them something to be able to chase and to be able to help you with.
And it's proactive.
Yes.
I always tell people always say, I want a great culture. I want a great culture. And we all want a great culture.
Yes.
And one of the things I always say to them is actually, that's true. Every company has its challenges. Absolutely. Yeah. Right. Just like families, just like everything else. And we create our own great culture by doing great work and doing the kind of work that you just talked about. Yes. And so because we do want a lot from our workplace, and we also want a lot for ourselves. And what are our goals? And so one of the things, I'm reading a book or listening to a book, and they talk about start with the end in mind. Where do you want to go? Or where do you think you want to go? Because sometimes that changes, right? Yeah. It's okay if it changes.
That's normal.
Yeah, exactly. And then how do you want to get there? And I just love your example of how you empowered that individual to bring those conversations forward, because they're not negative. It's positive. It starts with a positive instead of saying, this isn't happening or that's not happening. I want to do more of this. And it's whatever. It is all about being positive and engaged. And if you have the right kind of leader that recognizes what you're doing and what this will actually do for the team and for the individual and for that relationship, wow. Oh, I'm so inspired.
The analogy I always give people is, and I'm sure a lot of you can probably relate, but if you've ever gotten to that point where you're so hungry for dinner that everything sounds good and nothing sounds good, like my husband and I will have that debate, like, okay, we're going to go get takeout. We're both too tired to cook. What are we going to get? And it's like, you just stand there and look at each other. I'm not really sure where to go with this. It's the same thing in conversations with your employer. If you show up to a meeting and you tell them I'm unhappy, they're going to give you that look back because it's okay. Are we unhappy because of something that happened this morning outside? Did you have a flat tire? Are we unhappy? with your role? Are you unhappy with the company? Are you unhappy with your own development? Are you unhappy? Do we have a mental health crisis going on? There's so many layers to that. And so that's what I would say for the employees is give them at least a direction, right? Empower your manager to help you. Hey, I'm hungry. I don't want Italian. I don't want Mexican. Anything else is fair game. But at least gets us somewhere in the ballpark. So try and think about that. Like, we're human.
Yeah.
And organizations are comprised of humans. They're naturally going to have their bumps and bruises, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's great. That book sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I hope it's available on Audible.
Culture Shock. I believe it is. And I think I checked yesterday it was. So yeah.
Right.
We do have one question, if we can get to it before we wrap up. One of the attendees says, I want to own my career, but I cannot have this kind of transparent and motivated conversation with my manager. What advice do you have?
Wow.
Contact a coach.
Great.
That
Good idea.
That's the best thing I can say is you need to contact a coach, and you need to contact a coach soon. I can give you generic advice over this webinar that's not going to help you a whole lot. And that's why I would say contact a coach. You need to be able to talk with someone to get the intricacies of what's going on in that relationship. What's the dynamic there? If you feel like you can't have a transparent conversation with your manager, there's trust that's broken. And you and a coach can figure out, where is that trust broken? What happened there? Is it possible for you to find a mentor outside of your direct line manager? Is it possible for you to go outside of your organization to get your development and progress your career? Or is it time for some managing up, or maybe some frankness with that manager? Maybe they want to be a part of it, but they can't. I obviously don't know. There's some relationships that are broken, and that happens, and unfortunately, but trust is broken, and we need to figure out why and when and where and how the trust was broken, and can it be repaired? And do you have a desire to repair it? That's the other piece. Right. When I hear that question, my immediate reaction is, oof, this person is done with this relationship. So what options do we have? And how can we charter a career from there?
Yeah, it does take a village, and you can't do this alone.
Oh, 100%.
It's so important to talk it through. And we're not Clifton strength coaches, but Mulbery recruiters are coaches. People call us all the time with what's going on for them. And we are available for that. And then, of course, you are for a discovery call and to look at what your firm is able to offer. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us again today.
Yes.
Brandi, another great conversation. And we are so pleased that we have met and that we have this partnership. It's great.
It's fantastic. Thank you both so much. And if you do have any additional questions, or if your listeners have additional questions, please feel free, get in touch. I'm happy to answer those. I'm on social or the website, or Kelsey, I'm sure we can connect and get those answers if people have them. So
and what is your email for your company?
So you can email me directly at brandi@talentcareercoaching.com, or you can get the whole team at talentcareercoaching@gmail.com. So either one of those.
So thank you, Lauren and Brandi. This was amazing.
Wishing everyone a great weekend. Thanks again. Bye.
Bye-bye.